Why do certain video game communities turn toxic? Like, what's the difference between a game like Animal Crossing, which tends to foster a pretty nice, welcoming community, versus a game like League of Legends that's almost universally known as one of the most toxic games that are out there? And more importantly is that why is toxicity in online gaming almost like accepted as the norm at this point? Well, I was asking myself this question after I read a comment in my Wizard 101 video where I talk about how Wizard 101 is such a nice and welcoming community, but this guy said that the game tends to be more toxic when you get into more endgame content. So I just wanted to find out what exactly are the building blocks that you find in a video game that almost like predispose it to develop a more toxic community versus other games. I think the first thing we have to do is look at what kind of games are the most popular ones that have a toxic community. So when you talk about toxic communities, we're talking about Overwatch, which gets really toxic, believe it or not. Call of Duty, everyone has a history with the Xbox lobbies in Call of Duty. I didn't ever have an Xbox, so I can't relate, sorry. And from a personal experience, I think Apex Legends has one of the most toxic communities that I've seen out there. And it's not just toxic towards the other players, it's toxic towards your teammates, toxic towards your opponents, and toxic towards the game developers, the people that are actually working hard to push out updates for the game. People tend to have almost like an outburst, like a tantrum, when the developers don't give them the updates that they want. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you have games like Stardew Valley, for example, that has one of the friendliest communities out there. I already talked about Animal Crossing, and surprisingly, Warframe is also touted to be one of the most friendly communities of all time. But then when you look at Warframe, you realize, wait, Warframe is completely different from Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley, which you can argue that it maybe they're marketed towards the younger audience, that tend to be friendlier and happier. So let's talk about what exactly do all those games with toxic communities just have in common per se. We can start off with obviously the elephant in the room, which is their competitive online multiplayer PvP games. So they tend to be hard, they tend to require skill, and people are basically pitted against each other to compete and try to be the best that they can be at the game, This comment that Particle left basically speaks for itself. It says that easy games tend to foster a friendlier environment, while harder games carry higher expectations and may lead to toxicity. It's almost like the higher the difficulty and the more grind you have to put into the game, the more toxicity you're bound to find there. Because let's talk about the emotions that you feel when you're playing those games, or those high impact, high risk, high reward games. When you're playing a battle royale, for example, you want to win, you want to be the best. So you want to be able to stand out against the rest of the people. You want to be able to say that you're the one on top and everyone else that's around you is just below you. So you're already creating that gap between the good players and the bad players. And that's not always the case of what makes a community toxic, because there's a lot of fighting games, for example, where people play with respect and people play out of like that competitive nature, that sportsmanship behavior, that even though I'm completely destroying you in this game right now, keep going, champ, you'll get there, don't worry. Let me give you some tips and tricks. That sort of stuff you don't really see in these online games, or if it's like, if you do see them, they're already like really rare to find, so it's not something that just comes out right off the bat. So when you have a lot of these online multiplayer games, and specifically the team-based multiplayer games, winning the game sometimes is just completely out of your control, because you rely on the rest of your teammates kind of just pulling their weight and making sure that everyone reaches the objective, right? And that can sometimes lead to frustration, because in your mind, you feel like you're doing your job, you're doing the absolute best that you can do, but your teammate is slacking, they're not pulling their weight, maybe they're not as good as you, maybe they haven't put in the time, they haven't put in the hours, and let me tell you that there's nothing more annoying than having a toxic teammate. Yeah, toxic opponent, sure, right? You beat me, that's fine. I beat you, cool. It's part of the game. But when you have someone who's supposed to be your teammate, and that's the guy who's belittling you, who's screaming at you, who's just being overall a nuisance, that's just annoying. That's just super discouraging for me to want to play the game in the first place. That's the main reason I haven't even decided to check out League of Legends for myself, because just like the red flags of toxicity are already there, And it's just like, why do I want to subject myself to a negative experience? Why would I want to actually willingly put myself in a scenario where people are just going to scream at me for being new at the game or for not being good? Like, I'm not the best battle royale player out there. I admit that. I'm not the best. I get some wins here and there, but I'm not trying to go esports. I'm not trying to go pro on these games. I just want to go in and have my fun. But when I get teamed up with people that are just sweats, they're just tryhards, they just put way too much time and effort into a video game, at that time I'm just muting my mic and disconnecting, because I'm not even going to bother trying to reason with them as to why I'm just trying to have fun in a video game that's supposed to be fun, So sometimes those elements of wanting to look for superiority or just having general frustration when you're not the best at a video game, that can sometimes bring out the worst in people. And I think the one key factor that sort of escalates just being generally upset into just straight out being toxic is the fact that when you're on the internet, no one really has accountability for their actions. It's like the punishment that you get for being an idiot online doesn't really match up with the type of behavior that you engage, because realistically, when you're playing a game next to somebody, you're not going to be out trash talking and calling them slurs or just doing all this general idiotic behavior, you know? People just normally don't do that because they just have common decency. But on the internet, it's like people almost have a hard time humanizing other people, especially if all you know about them is just like a username. It's like that veil of anonymity just gives you the freedom to act as idiotic as possible and basically face little to no consequences for it. And I think the reason sometimes that can harbor is just, it's kind of hard for people to be nice, you know? You have to morally decide to be a kind person, a good person. You know, for some of us, that just comes naturally. Like, I don't go out there into the world and my first thought is, wow, let me just go be toxic to my neighbor, or let me just be toxic to this person or that person, you know? Like, for some people, it just comes naturally, but for some other peoples that just haven't developed any adequate social skills, they just don't know how to be good. They don't know how to be normal, so then they just act idiotic online, thinking, wow, this is completely normal. This is a completely normal scenario that happens in real life, and look at me engaging in it. Whoa, that's cool. No, it's stupid. It's stupid. Just stop. And I think that one of the main problems is that you see that sort of behavior and people don't actively try to engage with it, because you're not going to spend your time arguing with someone. Usually, like, my first reaction, for example, as soon as I experience any sort of toxicity, it's just like, I just disconnect. I just turn off voice chat, I just turn off chat. And that doesn't really like solve the problem for the community, because I'm actively choosing not to engage with the community. I'm just disconnecting, just unplugging from voice chat and just playing the game by myself. But that just means that the people that are actively taking part in the voice chat, the only ones that are left are like the toxic people, are the people who are just being toxic in general. And unfortunately, that's the type of behavior that you see translated when we're talking about a video game in general. And I would say that the people who are normal, the people who are kind, the people that just don't go into a game with the expectation to be toxic, those are considered the majority. But the vocal minority, the ones that stay in the voice chat being ridiculous with each other, that's the people that sort of define the community, unfortunately. And when we're talking about games like League of Legends or Apex Legends and stuff, that's the kind of experience that you get, because those are the people that actively engage with that. And when a gaming community kind of just gives up on itself and just chooses the toxic people to just basically take over the game, and you have a development team that doesn't really take care of the problem, that just gives the overall game, or just the gaming community as a whole, a bad look. It pushes away the good people and it keeps the bad people in, unfortunately. And I think that's kind of a reason why games like Stardew Valley, for example, or Animal Crossing tend to harbor a more nicer community, because the game is all about, you know, relaxing. There's no competition, there's no I have to be better than you. It's all about a sense of community, wanting to get together and sort of just build something together. Because you go to Animal Crossing forums and people just build islands and they just show it off and they're like, wow, that's awesome, cool, good for you. And they just want to like share that life experience of wanting to belong to somewhere, because they've probably been ostracized from all these other toxic communities. They just rally behind the kindness of others inside these nice, welcoming communities. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I personally enjoy the cozy games. I just love being able to sit down and relax and not having to worry about wanting to be the best, or just wanting to worry about my skill, or whether I'm missing my shots, or my teammates being an idiot. I don't have to worry about any of that, because I can just sit down, relax, and farm a little, or just play Wizard 101 or Pirate 101, a game where I can just basically either solo and have fun by myself, or have a couple of people join in and have fun with me. Now, that's not to say that the games are free from toxicity, because unfortunately, you find toxicity in just about anywhere. If you're playing Animal Crossing and you start time traveling, people are going to start calling you certain names. And from what I've been told, despite me thinking that Wizard 101 is a pretty nice and welcoming community, when you get to endgame content where the stakes are higher, when you have to win, when things just become a little bit more difficult, and especially in PvP as well, there seems to be a little bit more toxicity that creeps in. But us, a community, what can we do to combat that? Well, we already have the option of just disconnecting and ignoring it, but I think calling it out when it happens is also a really good thing to do. It might not solve the entire problem, because, well, who wants to spend their time arguing with people and kind of just discussing why they're wrong in the first place for being toxic? Because I'm pretty sure people, when they're being toxic, they're not thinking of, wow, I'm being toxic, I should probably stop. No, they're actively aware that they're being toxic, and you wanting to change their mind, probably not going to do anything, but at least calling them out and shaming them for it might do something, hopefully. So if you guys have any opinions on what you can do or what you're already doing to deal with this matter, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to leave a comment, and that's all I kind of wanted to talk about. So yeah, I'll catch you guys on the next one.